Bravo.
So let's start. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's exciting session. Our topic is Agile Methodologies and Project Management. Brought to you by LineProDev. I am Muhammad Adil Waqar, your host for the today's event. Joining me is none other than our esteemed founder, Philip Cutting. Today, we are thrilled to delve into the fascinating realm of Agile Methodologies and Project Management. Philip, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. Let's get started.
Thank you, Dill. The pleasure's mine. And it's great to be here to discuss this pivotal topic that we're hitting today about how to really function in a fast driven market to support business and development. So, love this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great topic to speak on. Absolutely. Agile has transformed the way we approach project management across various industries. So let's get started on this.
Okay,
I
sure.
guess our first segment is about the introduction about agile methodologies. Phil, can you please explain the agile methodologies? What are these?
Okay, so agile methodologies focus on iterative developments where
Mm-hmm.
requirements and solutions evolve throughout based off of intensive collaboration with the different stakeholders and uh, specialists, right? And I say specialists for a lot of different reasons because they may be your developer specialists, they might be outside specialists that help you resolve technical problems and
Mm-hmm.
to address the path and to also create more visual products that help to see if you're on track. So you create a lot more artifacts with agile
Mm-hmm.
methodologies than you do with non-agile methodologies, right? And that's what kind of agile means: simple,
Yeah.
quick, and well organized, right? So there's a lot to it, and we're going to jump into that through this conversation. Just consider that the core principles include the customer collaboration
Mm-hmm.
and uh, contract negotiation, responding to change. When you're doing an agile methodology, you're going to have a very different contract than you will if you're looking at a linear or quote unquote a waterfall approach, right? So that's what I
Absolutely.
just said is going to upset a lot of people, and it should for good reasons, right? We're not in the
Yeah.
80s anymore. Waterfall, nobody really ever used waterfall exactly like the way waterfall was done. Is textbooks, right?
Yeah.
And that's a religious debate. But the point is that we want to be able to look at the whole process from a higher angle, so you can look at the vectors to get you to project completion faster in
Mm-hmm.
smaller steps with more deliverables, including more, shifting some of the responsibility
Mm-hmm.
to people further along in the value chain. And it sounds scary, and it is scary in a lot of ways, but it's really helpful to maximize the talent you have, because when you give people an opportunity to be engaged, you'd be surprised how much value you can get out of your team members and those in the adjoining specialties. So
Yeah.
excited about this, and I'm interested to like, develop how we look at agile and how we look at the value of our teams.
Yeah, absolutely. Phil, it is all about the collaboration of the teams and the work environment. It is the both. It is the combination of both the things.
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. It's insightful from your side. I'm going on to our next session. The segment as well. Uh, Agile frameworks. Phil, could you walk us through some of the popular agile frameworks? How do they differ from each other? Can you please explain on it?
Okay, so it's a really good question, right? Um, Now, the most widely used frameworks we're going to look at today, Scrum being the most popular, Kanban, Lean, Extreme Programming.
Yeah.
These are the big ones, right? And they all have a lot of overlapping components, and it's really the nuance that's going to help separate out the components. So, for example, Scrum focuses on fixed length iterations called sprints. And
Yeah.
these involve roles like Scrum Master, Product Owner. and they rely on these fairly formalized structures to manage the project.
Yeah.
I do like Scrum a lot. um, and my initial process when I'm doing a project in the beginning, it uses a lot of Scrum techniques, though it's not truly Scrum, right? It's not truly
Yeah.
Agile either, right? At the beginning of most of my projects for MVP, it's it inherits a lot from Scrum, right? The next one is
Yeah.
Kanban. So on the other hand, it's more visual, it's more continuous, and it uses boards and cards to track work in progress and allow people to iterate cyclically on subcomponents. And it's kind of inherits a lot from waterfall,
Yeah.
where you can have you have this linear progression that
Mhm.
you have to build up onto, right? And this was why waterfall was so organic in the beginning. There are things you had to do before it went to the next stage, right? But Kanban makes it very visual so that you can really line up multiple projects, multiple components of a project, do them at the same time, iterate over it, and not have to wait for the full completion of a Kanban card or activity. You can then uh, at certain points you can start iterating other components, other cards. It's complex, but because it's visual, people really understand how to do it. We learned a lot from manufacturing
Yeah, absolutely.
from Kanban. And Lean aims to eliminate waste and optimize processes, while extreme programming emphasizes technical excellence and continuous improvement. So you can kind of see how all agile is a beautiful continuous process, but
Yeah.
there's minor nuances between the major categories, and there's dependent on your team, right? You can pick between the key features of them and see how to integrate. And it's easier to do with smaller teams versus when
Yeah.
you're in a corporate environment. When you're in a corporate environment, yeah, it's better to stick with a pure methodology because the
Yeah.
communication improves, right? It's you can
Yeah.
look at which of those is going to be better for the project or for the team, right? And it's kind of fun picking that out. It's a bit of a
Yeah.
challenge when you're
Mhm.
this is probably the biggest challenge when you're
Mhm.
dealing with organizations, established companies, versus when you're dealing with a startup. Depending,
Yeah,
picking which of
absolutely.
these processes is going to be the best and how to execute it.
Mhm. Yeah, good. It's good insight from from your side, Phil. A question comes into my mind that if a company is small and it has, the number is like 4 or 5, it is good for them to use these methodologies, or they should only go for the some other methods.
I think it depends on the state of what you're trying to execute, right?
Mm.
So I like small teams, and here's why. Small teams are very agile. They don't have to be rigid.
Yeah.
And when I look at small teams, I'm thinking like a special forces squad, right? Five
Mm.
or eight key talented people working together to really create
Yeah.
some amazing synergy that communicate very closely and work very closely over the long term, sometimes over
Yeah.
one project, sometimes over multiple projects, right? So
Mhm.
a lot of the times, because of my history, right? My military experience, I do love these
Yeah.
smaller teams, right?
Yeah,
They have a
absolutely.
special place in my heart. Um,
Yeah.
so as far as can a small team execute agile, I think agile is perfect for small teams, right?
Mm.
Because not so much extreme programming. Well, yeah, okay, extreme programming exactly, because you have your specialist in this case, but more so, I like Kanban with small teams
Yeah.
because of the flexibility and the ability to quickly iterate off of um, development cycles, right? So it really depends on the mindset of your team, what they do,
Mm.
um, and and later we'll probably discuss how to address the challenge of
Yeah.
uh, starting right. So the if you're not using agile to start with,
Mhm.
there is a transition period where you have to be ready for a little bit of suffering.
Yeah, absolutely. So Phil, each framework has its own use, and these are good if a company is following these methodologies. So a fun question come to in my mind that you have mentioned that you were in the military. So you have come to you have come to all these, the smaller teams and the longer teams as well. So you better know that these things as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's a very different way that you manage a 5-man team versus a
Mhm.
40-man team
Absolutely.
versus, you name it, a 500 employees or, however.
Mhm.
The But you can still break things down into manageable chunks,
Mhm.
and the leadership techniques that you use are, in fact, in a lot of ways similar to agile methodologies itself.
Yeah.
So it's fun. It's a great project management methodology.
Yeah, absolutely. So, coming back to our topic, the next segment is about the benefits of agile practices. Phil, what are some of the key benefits of adopting, agile practices? Can you elaborate these?
Sure, sure. Agile brings in numerous benefits, and these include flexibility, first of all, improving customer satisfaction, higher team morale, quicker iteration, easy to find, makes it easier to find mistakes, and
Yeah,
it helps prevent developer in the cave syndrome, right?
yeah,
So you can't do agile and have your developer that goes off into the woods for 6 months and comes back. It's just the
absolutely.
opposite concept. And with Agile, we keep things in manageable chunks, and the teams can respond to feedback faster and seek
Yeah,
feedback in ways that help them make adjustments that are needed and responding to the environment and to the needs of the product. And a lot of these reasons are why I say there's a difference between the agile that you would run in the very beginning stages of an MVP versus what
yeah,
you'd run when you're working with a corporation or established products. That there are very different approaches that
mhm,
inherit different methodologies. You could
yeah,
say that the MVP uses a less mature but quicker version of agile, while more mature products really need to dive deeper into the agile methodology to keep the structure and quality of the project going.
absolutely. So that's impressive. It's the clear that agile not only enhances project outcomes but also contributes to a positive work culture.
Yeah, absolutely. It helps people feel heard, right? So when
Yeah,
your developers have the ability to give feedback, and uh, here's one challenge you have, and it's a cultural challenge, right?
yeah,
If we're thinking waterfall, if we're thinking I give my developer a task and he executes and he goes back to me, and if it's not perfect, he's done,
mhm,
right? you if you've never talked to that developer or that team about if these expectations are reasonable in the first place, you've taken away their voice, and made them you've made it so that they're actually not accountable to
mhm.
failure, right?
Yeah,
Agile breaks that cycle by integrating them, getting their feedback, having them make commitments, right? And you don't hold their feet too much to the fire to these commitments, because estimating things is a special art, right? And if you really overhold them to the
mhm,
estimates that they give, right, without flexibility, they're going to overpad it, right? So
yeah,
you have to maintain that real flexible mindset and
mhm,
understand, yeah, plus or minus 20%, and have that culture that, yeah, we're going to have gains that we realize that we didn't anticipate. We're also going to have losses that we didn't anticipate, and over the
yeah,
time of a project, life cycle of a project, it should even
mhm,
out, right? And we'll and there's ways to look at how these projects are executing as they go
yeah.
through the life cycle of the entire project to make sure you're staying on track.
Yeah, absolutely. Great insights. Phil, a question coming into my mind that what is the role of the project manager in agile environment? Can you please explain?
Okay, so for me, the role of the project manager is to keep the overall picture in mind in the overall timeline. he should
Yeah.
be in the very beginning doing a lot
Yeah.
of hard work that is making sure that he's rallying the troops, that
Mhm.
he is getting feedback from the developers, making sure that the planning is executed well, that things are reasonable, and
Yeah.
that the expectations that they're setting can be met.
Mhm.
A lot of the times in Agile, you start with the big question, right? And
Mhm.
then the project manager takes and breaks that down into his specialist and goes to his teams and says,
Mhm.
okay, these are your components, or really what he does generally has a team meeting. Here's the project and the scope. How do I divvy this out between you guys, right? It's a big team, maybe they have pizza or cards, little cards or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Definitely not beers, right? Developers never drink beer. Okay, just so you guys know that. Um,
Yeah.
they are so mature and reasonable people. They only drink coffee. But but the this is the job of the project manager, and then he goes through and makes sure that the code is being executed and the development is being
Yeah.
executed in time. If they have to get more time or if they have to adjust the requirements, they do this. They evaluate the risk and value proposition, and they
Yeah.
make the project manager doesn't exactly make these choices, but he prepares the path so that he can discuss costs and benefits and time
Yeah.
requirements with the client or whoever the project stakeholder is to
Mhm.
make sure that the real value is being met in a way that's possible. Sometimes you hit roadblocks, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes Apple is known for changing requirements. Google, more so lately, is becoming known for changing the requirements, adding things, making it so that you have to take certain paths that you didn't anticipate. There's things that get
Yeah.
depreciated, and over the course of a project, you may
Yeah.
have to really pivot your entire plan. And this is the talent of the project manager. It's really a lot of responsibility, but his big job is communication and making sure things are on track.
Yeah.
And when they start coming off track, bubble that up to both the developers and the stakeholders so they can make a proper path forward.
Yeah. Really impressive from your side, Bill. I'm going on,
Yeah,
you
I've never
know.
had a project go crazy because of unexpected or expected things. Wish that never happened,
Yeah.
at least.
So, moving on to our next segment, which is about the implementing Agile in different industries. Well, Agile is often associated with software development, but it's being
Mhm.
used in many other industries as well. Can you share some, how Agile can be implemented in these different sectors?
Okay, terrific. I'm such a big fan of the book, The Goal, the DevOps Handbook, and the Phoenix Project.
Mhm.
And these books talk about how agile, really the evolution of agile and DevOps, which is kind of like agile on steroids, right? So it talks
Mhm.
about the evolution of this process and how it came out of manufacturing, right? So
Yeah.
when we look at the core of this, we can look back and see how these techniques apply to healthcare, finance,
Mhm.
military developments, manufacturing, marketing, right? How it can apply to your darn marriage, right? So if you anybody has more than one kid, right, knows what it is to have to juggle multiple requirements and how important it is to coordinate, right? Even if you have one kid, right, it can become a challenge.
Yeah.
So agile processes can be and are implemented in every industry and every facet of life. I'm not sure I would go and talk to my wife about how we need to have a better agile relationship. That may sound awkward, but take some of the processes that we talked about, the meeting, communication,
Mhm.
taking the bigger projects, delegating some of that to your partner, getting the feedback, making sure you're on track, right? Can you see how you can apply these concepts from anything from healthcare to, dealing with your mother-in-law?
So looks
You
like
see
you
what I mean.
are, in your married life, you are also following the agile
I
methodologies.
am, but I don't tell my wife like that. Uh-uh.
It's good. It's good. Impressive.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, the way developers think is probably not normal, but so what, right? We're a special class of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on to our other, segment, agile tools and techniques. Philip, what are some essential tools and techniques used in agile project management?
Okay, great question. So some of the tools that we rely on heavily go from range between communication
Mhm.
to project management to DevOps tools, right? And some of the big ones, Slack, right? Or for some people, Discord or Skype, right? I like Slack. But that's not a project management tool. It's a communication tool. Project management tools like Jira, Trello, Asana, ClickUp,
Yeah,
those are all amazing tools. And I
yeah.
use a lot of ClickUp and Asana, right? Sometimes I use Jira if the client's already using it. But if
Mhm.
I have the chance to start from the beginning, I
Mhm.
tend to run towards Asana. Now, it could be a simple spreadsheet, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Whatever it is to organize your information. There's a lot of background noise. I wonder if that's me. So the point isn't the tools that you're using, right? But how it facilitates organization of specific tasks and of management of your application, right? So Asana, Trello, Jira, right? Those are the big ones that come to mind with that.
Yeah,
For DevOps, you're thinking concepts, right? You're thinking, how do I handle disaster recovery? How do I handle servers going down or service attacks or denial of services? What do I do if, for example, all of a sudden I can't use AWS anymore, or if
yeah.
this region has a problem, right? How do I handle all these nuanced things that do come up? Or, for example, in 2020, we saw companies that got shut down
Yeah.
because they had expressed an idea that wasn't popular, and
Mm.
they got shut down by their cloud providers. They lost their client data for time of being. They lost access to their servers. Right. Make sure
Yeah.
that you have systems to recover from that if you lose access to your database, or there's a corruption or attack, or you get hacked. Right. These are all critical things that you want to look at while you're doing that. So include another concept: continuous integration, continuous testing, making sure that you have your repositories, making sure you're protecting your intellectual property, right? And I'm not going to go into, but just very lightly, there's legal concerns that you also want to make sure that you have a process that you have set up, including trademarks, patent protection if you have patentable ideas, making sure that you
Yeah.
have entities and that your terms and conditions are properly set up. All these things go to create the whole system. And when we're looking at project management and business management, they all tie
Mm.
together, right? Don't forget, for us as developers, it's so easy to forget the whole business model, right? When we're focused on
Yeah.
developing this, but a good project manager, or the guy that's managing the project managers, right? Generally, somebody
Yeah.
that's managing the project manager is making sure that they're keeping their eyes on the high picture, also, not just to focus on that pitch, right? There's a lot to it, and the tools that I mentioned there, I think, are helpful in keeping
Yeah.
that
Absolutely.
vision, so that we can sit above it and still not get lost in the weeds.
Yeah, absolutely. A question is coming to my mind is that what are the specific tools which you are using in your daily life for these methodologies? What would
Okay,
you
cool.
prefer?
My preferred stack for an agile project is
Mm-hmm.
Slack for communication,
Yeah,
Asana for project management,
yeah,
Zapier to pull things together, uh, Zoom for face-to-face meetings
yeah,
often, and GitHub for um, for my repositories and continuous integration testing, and I am a big fan of AWS for
Mhm.
my cloud solutions because I don't really find that having local hardware is a
Mhm.
good way to run your business anymore because of the cost, because of the security risks, right? So even though I wouldn't consider it's hard to consider AWS a tool, right? I think it's a suite of resources that we should really consider the benefits of. But you also should be able to shift off of AWS and to be able to rapidly integrate into a virtual private server or dedicated private servers to
Yeah.
help maintain the integrity of your apps and your business.
Yeah, it's good. So the audience, these are the insights which are coming from the founder. You can take notes from it.
Oh yeah, it comes from blood, sweat, and tears.
So it's good. You are using these tools to, manage all the things which you are doing. It's good.
Yeah, these are the tools we use internally.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yeah, you sound great.
Yeah, great. So moving on to our next segment, which is agile metrics and performance measurement. Let's talk about performance measurement. How do agile teams measure these success?
Oh boy, what a hard question. So agile teams use several metrics to gauge performance. And I wouldn't look at these as KPIs, but more about looking at velocity and uh, the projection, the trajectory that you're looking at on an overall project, right? So these obviously you have to look at velocity, the rate that you're working at, lead time, cycle time, burn down charts. Although I don't love burn down charts because they tend to have what I don't like about burn down charts is first of all it's kind of a negative philosophy that's kind of like a punishment philosophy. And second, that I don't like the way it intuitively handles risk and changes in the environment, right? So burn down essentially means when you look at it, it's like, hey, these conditions change. You know, how do we deal with this negative event? There's the opposite of burn down, where you're looking up into the completion of your project and you're adjusting the requirements, you're adjusting how you manage features to meet those goals. And if you have to, you adjust the timeline, right? So it kind of intuitively gives you more flexibility based off what the priorities are. And
Yeah.
it also encourages more communication back down the track between the
Mm.
developers and up the track with stakeholders so that you really communicate and make sure you're finding what's important. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's my obvious. Sorry about the rant. That's my concept on burn down. So velocity is going to measure the amount of work completed in a particular sprint, right? So think Scrum, right? While lead time and cycle time track the duration from the task initiation to completion. And I, depending on the project and the particular client, is how I'm going to use these metrics to help determine success or completion of a particular project, right? Different for me,
Yeah.
different clients and their values, right? What they
Mhm.
value, their value statement is going to let me know which methodology and which metrics make more sense for them and how we respond to that, right?
Yeah.
And I think these are things that you have to keep in mind when you're managing these projects, but also you want to make sure that you're utilizing resources. These particular metrics are super useful for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Metrics are, essential for maintaining transparency and driving continuous improvement. They help teams stay on their track and make data-driven decisions to them.
Yeah, and they help make sure that you can predict the path and completion of your project, which is really important
Yeah.
nowadays.
Yeah.
Success at
Moving
all
on.
costs.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to the next, the segment is which challenges in agile adoption and how to overcome them. Phil, what are some challenges organizations face when adopting Agile, and how can they overcome these?
Okay, terrific. This is we run into these challenges on every project that you do, right? Any project that's sizable, you're going to run into some problems, and the that's why we have agile, right? Now there's two things. When you're dealing with startups, right? Or startup entrepreneurs, if they're early in their experience with creating projects, with creating companies, then
Yeah,
they're not going to be familiar with how agile works, and how to run a project, right? So they're learning along the way. Now this is going to mean a couple things. For these guys, they're going to have a learning curve that isn't natural, right? So they call it a J curve, right? It starts like you have a base productivity if you just attack a problem like with a hammer, right? But it goes when you're learning agile, it goes down before it ever goes back up. And once you get and this is because there's a learning curve, and also because there's a upfront cost to applying agile where
yeah,
that you wouldn't have if you just try to attack it and solve it as quick as possible, right? And that's why sometimes pure agile isn't always super helpful, right? But
yeah,
in the beginning, you have to overcome resistance to change for established companies if they're not using agile. You have to integrate training so that people understand what they're doing, and thus the J curve. And sometimes you have to overcome poor culture fit or misalignment between teams and leadership. And
yeah,
finally, you have to make sure that if you are going agile, that you are rewarding and punishing appropriately. It's a different concept than how you reward or punish the consequences from a linear progression where you're expected to just produce an output, right? We
yeah,
keep in mind agile is more commutative, it's more responsive, right? And these benefits come at a cost of a little extra time, but they
yeah,
accelerate the completion of a project successfully, right? So if success is your big factor, we completed it, we're making money, right? And these are our goals. If that's important, agile all day, right? If the value of the project is completed, like I told you specifically in these regards, maybe agile is not it, right? So you got to understand those requirements and consequences and rewards so that you can align everybody's interest and people understand what's expected. And it's hard to express sometimes.
yeah, absolutely. So, Phil, a question is coming into my mind that you have already experienced a lot in your life, but when you were
You're
young,
calling
you
me
were
old, right?
starting up. Haha, yeah.
You're calling me old, right? I'm kidding.
So you have a good experience, and when you were young and you were starting up the things, so basically you are not into the agile methodology. But how you managed to get the projects in the beginning?
Hmm. So the is the question how I acquire projects or how I completed them?
How you get projects if the company's requirement is the agile methodologies, but how you manage
Mhm.
to, because you don't have so much resources for the environment, for the team as well, so how you manage that?
Sure, sure. So it starts with a discussion with the client on
Mhm.
what they consider agile to be,
Yeah.
right? Now, they may consider agile to be simply Kanban, right? And if it's Kanban, then what they're looking at is a hybrid of waterfall. You have a bunch of tasks. I want them
Yeah.
completed roughly in this order,
Hmm.
right? And here's how we're going to get to the finish line. When
Hmm.
you're dealing with a client on this regard, then it's kind of normal, right? You just say, hey, this is a healthy way to do a project, right? You
Hmm.
don't need a lot of additional resources. Now, if you're dealing with a client and they say, here's my design, here's the requirements, all you have to do is execute it, and
Yeah.
it's not your responsibility if it makes sense or not, right?
Mm.
Then you can just go waterfall it to death, right? And pass on
Yeah.
that responsibility. When I talk to a client like that, they're like, whoa, now you're being a jerk, right? I'm like, no, you gave me specifics on how to execute this, right?
Mm.
I can execute it based off of my talents and my intellectual powers, or I can
Mm.
execute it based off of being an efficient machine,
Yeah.
right? Or, we can see where in the middle it makes sense, right? And it
Mm.
depends on what they're trying to execute. Uh, for if it's a startup, I am trying to encourage them to plan well, to
Mm.
get that base product out there, and then
Mm.
start responding more agilely, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to have a well thought out plan. First of all, I don't want to have a poorly thought out plan that doesn't
Mm.
consider things before I start, right?
Yeah.
Before I start my MVP. But I also don't want to have a so well thought out plan that I've developed for the next 2 years of the project. And this is the rigidness of it. You can go agile in a very light manner and really get amazing results by thinking quick deliverables, get it out to the market, put it in people's
Mhm.
hands, and making sure what we thought is accurate is what's going to
Yeah.
serve the markets. And a lot of customers respond well inside that range, and that they're intuitively will let you know what they're going to need. And
Mm.
when you're talking to them, sometimes you have to express that, okay, cool, I see where you're coming from. I love it. Here's the risks based off my experience that if we execute it
Yeah.
like this will happen. Now, don't get me wrong. There's risk to agile, right? Agile
Mm.
can run over longer than it should. You
Yeah.
can totally change path. It is more expensive to get a well done agile project out there with
Yeah.
continuous feedback from the environment, because change costs money, right? Anytime you
Absolutely.
have to
Yeah.
plan, anytime you change something, these are unexpected costs. Now, if you build that into your philosophy, you reduce
Mm.
that cost in the long run and you get a better product out there quicker. It's a hard
Mm.
philosophy to say, I'm going to get out a minimum version of something that's good and not try to go for perfect. There is the philosophy out there that you should take as long as it takes to make that perfect product and get it out there. I rarely see that being helpful. It does sometimes work. It does. It is. There's a place for it, right? And a lot of it depends on the risk of the products. For example, if it's car manufacturing items, if it's safety related, if people can get hurt, right? These are big things. If there's risk legally to consequences if it's not perfect, right? Those are big things. But generally, I find it's not those concerns that are
Mm.
on the projects. It's really somebody changes their mind about a little detail before they get it out because they talked about it, and
Yeah.
they get kind of that jitter of, is it good enough? Don't let
Mm.
that is it good enough fear get in your way. Get out there, generally do good, and iterate and try to be quick on how you can respond. And trust your team. Trust the work that you put into that. If you did a discovery process, if you interviewed people beforehand, if you've got that industry knowledge and research that you should have
Mm.
done in the planning process, trust yourself a little bit and be brave. So yeah, agile is a lot of fun. You have to do it the right place.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Really appreciate. Moving on to our next session, which is agile and remote work. Given the rise of remote work, how does agile adapt to our distributed team environment?
Okay, so agile can be really highly effective in remote work environments thanks to its emphasis on
Mm.
communication, collaboration, and small iterative contributions that you can
Yeah.
see, right? So frequent updates of code, frequent commits, smaller components and functionality going together
Mm.
to create the whole. is very beneficial for remote workers because it keeps them from getting bogged down in complexity. It helps them focus on the task in front of them, and it also helps protect the people that they're doing the project from by giving more frequent deliverables. And in case there's a catastrophic loss of internet, life, health, access, or interest from the remote workers, right? These are risks you have no matter what, if they're locally or remote. But a lot of these are enhanced because of the remote environment. Also, don't get me wrong, the allowing people to work remotely has massive benefits in both cost savings, in motivation, in finding talent that you couldn't otherwise have because of either physical constraints. Maybe a person is disabled in some way. Maybe they have to be around to help their loved ones. Maybe they have somebody sick they're providing care for. They don't have to be they don't have to do a lot for that care, right? But they have to be around for a few minutes here and there. So these considerations are really amazing at expanding the amount of talent that you have available. Now, that said, I do like to have my developers in-house, right? So there's different ways to look at remote agencies, at remote shops, at remote talent, right? There's places for all of it, and there's ways to massage and support that. But going back to the tools, right? If you're using Kanban, or for example, Asana, which is kind of like organically Kanban, right? Now, keep in mind, Extreme Programming and Scrum both use the Kanban concepts. They just execute it differently. Right. So, but by using these technologies, we compact the work focus, and we also make it so that we have ways to store information related to tasks or requirements that makes it easy to think and to visualize your work, thus maximizing the team's talents to be creative, to execute quickly, and to see the results of their work quickly.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You are right about it. Your agile adaptability really shines in a remote work context. It ensures that the distance doesn't hinder productivity and collaboration. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's the best benefit of using these agile tools, right? That you simplify it for everybody, and that you keep the collaboration high. They feel connected, and it kind of makes, when you do it well, it makes distance disappear.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Phil, can you share some case stories about agile methodologies have made a significant impact?
Oh, how not? Okay, Spotify is probably like one of the industry's shining beacons of using agile, and it even has its own Spotify model. There's books about it, and this model emphasizes autonomous squads, right? You guys know my love for small groups, specialized groups, and these groups that work in highly collaborative environments, thus leading to rapid both innovation and scalability, right? Other examples include ING Bank, which adopted Agile to improve its IT operations, right, and
Yeah.
customer services. The results in this for ING Bank were impressive because they had faster delivery times, enhanced customer satisfaction, and improved reliability. Right, with a bank, what more do you need than reliability? Come on. So there's numerous cases out there where it just shines. Airbnb, another great example, right, of a company that brought it to heart.
Yeah, impressive. So, Phil, moving on to our next segment, which is the audience segment as well. The audience is, the electronic today. So, some of the questions I'm taking from them.
Oh, terrific.
Is it okay?
Yeah, of course. Fire away. I love questions from the
Yeah.
audience. This is my favorite part, right? Sometimes I don't have all the answers, and sometimes I come back, think about it for a little bit, and I'm like, "Oh no, I should have answered like this." So, guys, forgive me.
Mm,
Throw in your, throw your questions at me, and if you have
absolutely.
good questions, make sure you throw them in the comment section,
Mm,
and we'll try to make sure we get those answered if we didn't address them in the call.
absolutely, absolutely. So, our first question from the audience side is, how do you prioritize tasks in an agile environment when everything seems urgent?
Hmm. Okay, so everything is urgent, of course, right? It's people's money and there's success of the business on the line.
Yeah.
So this is why we focus on both agile and DevOps. And the way I prioritize things is by having my process, right? And it starts with discovery, making sure you understand the problems, you've included the team in addressing all those challenges, the features make sense, the process makes sense, and then you've gone through and you've created a design. Doing a design phase is an agile practice expectation, right? It
Yeah.
visually puts the product in the hand of the stakeholders without functionality, but it allows them to visually go through it and to address if it makes sense and if it's going to work. Now they can take this early design stage.
Mm,
I shouldn't say early, right? It depends, what you're doing. But if it's an MVP, you got that whole design concept. You can take it, do a quick case study, do some quick interviews with that. If it's an established organization, you can
yeah.
take that design and you can also look and see if it makes sense. You can take it to the cross-functional teams and see
Mm,
if it makes sense and take it to your clients also and to the users, right? Clients, that's a loose term in this environment, but to be able to test it out, this is the critical for agile, right? It's a deliverable that you put early on
yeah.
and is very important. After that, you're looking at creating micro deliverables that start getting functionality into the hands of the people testing it as quick as possible. And this is going to help do a couple things: verify that it's working and on track, that
Yeah.
you've set your priorities in a way that organically makes sense because you've gone through discovery, you've gone through design. Right now, you're delivering in a way that just makes sense. Right at this point, you are
Yeah.
so intimate with the problem, and this is why I say hire the same agency, and I prefer agencies for development, of course, right?
Yeah.
But I have the same agency to go from discovery through design through development because they
Mm,
are intimate with the entire process. They know how to handle changes that came up that you couldn't predict, and they also help you manage the way it should be executed. Just because it's so normal, right? Good developer, good agency is going to, based off experience, know how to prioritize those in a way that's really hard for a person that hasn't done a few projects before. If you're starting off on your first project, go through this process and you'll create a good enough uh, process to really execute. Right? Does that answer the question? It's hard to do unless you've done it. Create that process. You will then go and know how to prioritize things. It becomes obvious. But if you skip any of those steps, you're in a huge amount of trouble. If you skip the planning, if you skip the design, I don't know how to help you from there, right? I've had clients that say, I've done the discovery myself. I don't care. I just go ahead and give me the design. We go through the design, right? And then we go into the development of the product. And they didn't get what they really wanted because they even though they designed the project the way they had in their mind, they didn't think through the problem in the first place in a detailed
Yeah.
way, and they ended up changing their mind a lot because they discover the problem through the development and the agile cycle. It can be done. It's a terrible way to do it. It becomes very expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. You have explained the whole concept behind this. So our next question is, what role does customer feedback play in agile iterations and how it is incorporated?
Okay, so with Agile, I'm hearing it myself a lot from your. Am I on speaker, Adil?
Yeah.
Am I on speaker? Because I think I hear myself.
Can you please speak again?
I said I think I hear myself. Um, so are you? Do you have me on speaker?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I hear myself talking too. All right.
Yeah, you
Okay.
can continue.
Okay. Cool. The so do me a favor. Read back the question again.
I'm asking again, Phil. Okay.
Yeah, please.
What role does customer feedback play in agile iterations and how it is incorporated?
Okay. So this is the purpose of Agile in a mature product. You create the sprint or the development cycle, right? And you have a small deliverable, and then you can have this product that you see and test, and you get feedback from users, from the stakeholders, right? You can see it. So Agile is the part of the process of Agile is breaking things down into small workable components that have quick deliverables so that you can get feedback and you can modify it from that in the next iteration or the next sprint, right? So one thing that's hard to do is, here's a mistake that a lot of people make. They define a sprint, they create the product, and in mid sprint they get feedback and they try to change things. This isn't how you do it, right? The right way to do this is to complete the whole sprints, to get a bulk of feedback, and then create another sprint or another cycle of development that relates to that project and gets feedback appropriately. There's healthy ways to take feedback, and there's unproductive ways to take feedback. And feedback is always good, but it should be summarized. It should be considered in a meaningful way. But this is feedback that changes development, right? If it's when inside a sprint, you're going to have feedback that keeps you on track and making sure that you're delivering the product that you're expected to deliver. And that's micro feedback inside of sprints that's expected and comes through testing and the normal sprint. And that's a benefit to sprints, is being able to integrate that feedback inside that internal loop of that development cycle. You just have to be careful how you handle feedback and when you execute it. Are you muted? I don't hear you, brother. Okay, say something for me. Looks like we're having technical difficulties.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, I hear you now. Bravo. Welcome back.
Hello.
Okay, I hear you. Go ahead and say something for me. Okay. While you're working on that, if you want to send me another question, I'll answer it. All right, I
Hello.
hear some noise now. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Audible?
Yep. Your audio and
Okay.
looks like your camera's back in place.
You are not audible right now, Phil. I'm working on it. Just wait.
Okay. All right. No problem. I see my microphone working, so I should be audible. All right. I am talking now. And I'm curious what other questions. Or maybe we should go ahead and end the call. So can you hear me now? It's like the old Sprint commercial. Can you hear me now? Very nice. Let's go ahead and end this here so we have technical difficulties. All right, guys, look, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. If you have questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat, in the comments, like, subscribe, and I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Have a great one.